All right, open up your Bibles to Job chapter 12, if you would. Job chapter 12. For your Job is going to be replying. This is his first of three chapters. He'll be replying to Zophar's statements. And I want to break this down into three parts. I'm a joke to my friends. They're the first 6 verses. God's power in creation and then God's power revealed. But let's start by looking at those first 6 verses. Job responded, "Truly then you are the people, and with you wisdom will die. But I have intelligence as well as you. I am not inferior to you. And who does not know such things as these? I am a joke to my friends. The one who called on God and he answered him, the just and the blameless man is a joke. He who is at ease holds calamity and contempt, as prepared for those whose feet slip. The tents of the destroyers prosper, and those who provoke God are secure, whom God brings into their power." So, right off the bat, we see Job is using some sarcasm, right, in his reply. And I think it's interesting that we notice a change in the mood is felt here. Always before the other chapters or his responses, how would Job normally open up his talk? Sarcasm, something kind of almost a funny joke like he said here, or how does he normally respond? Happy, sorrowful, great despair. But so we see a change in tone here. You may remember a few times we said this. He's at a low point. He's really down in the dumps, and now he's heard from all 3 friends, and he's about had enough of it. And so now he's kind of lashing back out, and he's talking not just to one, but really all 3. When he says "you are the people," that word "you" is in the plural. And that word, what he's saying there is you're the high in nobility of the land here. You're the people, and with you, wisdom dies. Now that seems pretty obvious what he's saying there, right? With you, wisdom dies. Why does wisdom die with them? Oh, yeah. They had the dreams, Eliphaz. They looked to the forefathers, Bildad. And Zophar, apparently, he knows God. And so well, no one knows him better than he does. But when they make statements, they can't back it up. And with them, wisdom dies because it's not going anywhere. And he's going to show them why here in just a moment. And then he says there in verse 3 that he has intelligence, just like they do. That's literally the Hebrew word for the heart. And you may remember when we talk about the spirit of a man as the mind and the heart of man. The mind is where we gather all our knowledge, everything that we know. But it's the heart where we do what? It's where we make our decisions. It's where we have our standard by which we live, and we make decisions based on that heart, our standard. And so he has that as well, and he's not inferior to them as they seem to be thinking. And he thinks, you guys think I'm just a joke there at verse 4. No one who likes to be laughed at. Anybody raise your hand? Laughed at? But we learned that pretty early on. I know with babies, we laugh with them quite a bit, and they'll laugh back, but it doesn't take long, just a year or two into growing up, and they sometimes start to think that if everyone's laughing, they think they're laughing at them, and they get upset, and they throw a fit, and they run off. And the one who called on God, and he answered him, is Job. Remember in the prologue, Job is described as a religious man sacrificed to God, even on the suspicion that his children might have sinned. And they know this about Job. He is just. He is blameless. And yet they see him as a joke. And so he's fighting for his innocence here. But what evidence do his friends put forth that he has sinned? What evidence have they put forth? Anyone remember of all the we've looked at so far from chapter 4 all the way up to now, what was their evidence? Gary's shaking his head, no evidence. But what did they think their evidence was? Yeah, oh, you're suffering, therefore you must have sinned. But what could that sin possibly be? What was his actions? They don't know. So if they don't know what it is, where should they turn to find the information? It would be Job. And he says he's done nothing wrong. And so he says there in verse 5, he who is at ease holds calamity in contempt. He's talking about them, his own friends. It's easy for those who have not suffered any kind of misfortune to dismiss what is happening here with Job. And when Job said there in verse 6 that the tents of the destroyers prosper, I think he may have had in mind what had already happened to him. He's going to start pointing to some of the logical arguments, although he's hinting, I think, at the things that happened to him, but he's going to look at creation here in a moment. But think about this. So if your three friends come to you, and you are Job, and they tell you, well, you must have sinned because look at all the suffering, and that only the wicked suffer, the righteous prosper. What about the Chaldeans and the Sabians who stole his property, killed, murdered his servants, and took off with everything? So they're thieves and they're murderers. Are they prospering or are they suffering? They prospered. They prospered. So what about them? Why aren't they suffering? Because they're not. They're not thinking this through. And those who provoke God are secure. That, again, are those like the Chaldeans and others who do provoke God, whom God brings into their power. And then he goes to pointing out the creation in 7 through 12. But now ask the beasts, and let them teach you, and the birds of the heavens, and let them tell you, or speak to the earth, and let it teach you. And let the fish of the sea declare to you. Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In whose hand is the life of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind? Does not the ear test words, as the palate tastes its food? Wisdom is with the aged men. With long life is understanding. Have you ever heard the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but what? Is that a true statement or a false statement? Yes. Now, if somebody that I know is my enemy is hurling insults at me, I could care less. But if my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ hurl bad words at me, it hurts really bad. Nothing hurts worse, I think, than having somebody within the body of Christ speak ill or poorly of you. So remember, again, look back to Job. When all this was happening to him and his friends are there and he opens up about his pain and how he wished he was dead, looking for comfort, and what does he get from them? Sorrow upon sorrow. They're telling him this is all your fault. The Bible is full of references about us to for us to challenge what our tongues say, to be careful about not only what we say, but how we say it. Proverbs 25:11. Like apples of gold in settings of silver is a word spoken in right circumstances. I like that one. Or Paul says in Ephesians 4:29, let no what proceed from your mouth? Unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. The dialogue that we see happening here between Job and his friends was a sad one, but it should not have been that way. In Job 2:13, it states that his friends saw that his pain was very great, And yet all they could tell him was, well, you must have sinned. If you just ask God for forgiveness, you'll be fine. And even though he told them over and over again, I have not sinned, and finally when the third friend speaks up and does the same thing, he's had enough. And now Job is fighting back. Proverbs 18:2, a fool does not delight in understanding, but only in revealing his own mind. Do you know people like that who are, they're like walking opinions. Anything you say or do, they've got an opinion on that. Oh, yeah, all this. And they can be annoying to be around. James was correct when he said in James 3:10, my brethren, these things ought not to be this way. Think about the difference it would have made if Job's three friends had asked the same question that Elijah asked Elisha. What can I do for you? Think about the comfort Job would have gotten if they said, we're hurting for you, Job. We're here to take on this burden with you. We call that sensational communication. It is always relational. Every comment we make is either going to bless a relationship or harm a relationship. These guys did not have wisdom, foresight, compassion to respond to Job in a manner that would bless him or bring him any comfort. So again, by the time we get to chapter 12, Job has been hurt by the words of his friends. He just heard a cold and callous rebuke from Zophar there. So how does he respond? He's had enough, and so he returns with a volley of things. So he begins by chiding his friends. Someone like Zophar, he's self-righteous. He's attacking him verbally. It's easy to get on the defensive and be sarcastic, and we see him do just that. When he says, then truly then you are the people, and with you wisdom will die. Well, Zophar, man, who can stand before you? Wow. But he holds his ground, is what Job does, and he's going to stick to the truth. After he sarcastically chides all three of them, he begins to say, I have intelligence just like you. I'm not inferior to you. And, we should be glad he does this. God gave all four of them life. He gave all four of them breath, and they were all precious in his sight. Or any of them without sin? No. They're all in the same boat, but in their minds and in their attitudes, Job is worse off than they are because of the circumstances he finds himself in. So, Job didn't have this superiority complex like they did, but he also did not have an inferiority complex either. He recognized what was going on. He did not know why the things that were happening to him were happening, but he knew that his three friends were not in the right. So, he says, you think I'm a joke. Again, no one likes to be ridiculed in this way. But he talks about that, or says that twice. He mentions that. They had been arrogant. They had been narrow-minded. They had not considered the fact that maybe their viewpoint could be wrong. They assumed they were right, even though there was no evidence other than the fact that they thought, well, you're suffering, therefore you must be a sinner. So when Job commented in verse 5, he essentially told them that it was easy for them to accuse him and to abuse him when they had never worn the shoes of misfortune. It's easy for them to stand there and say all these words. And so he speaks the truth, talking about the greatness of God. Verse 9, he mentions the hand of the Lord. He spoke the truth when he told his friends that there were many things about God that they and he could not explain. Remember, they considered themselves to be superior. At least that's the way they presented themselves. So Job asks his intelligent friends, go sit down with the animals. Go sit down with the birds and see if you can learn something about God from your visit. There in verses 7 and 8. His point is that there is a God-given instinct in all the animals, and they can't explain everything about the creative greatness of God. Nor can we explain everything about the greatness of God. how often are we discovering something new we didn't know that animals could do or wouldn't do, or some new animal that was out there, or the way they change in order to survive whatever circumstances they're in. Job mentions a number of great mighty things that God did in the verses 13 to 25. God can tear something down to the point where no one could ever rebuild it again. In verse 14. If God wanted to, he could imprison someone where they could never be released again. He noted that God could send out the waters and he could restrain the waters. We know from biblical history God does these things. He mentions that God has the power to make nations great. He has the power to destroy the nations there in verse 23. He wants his friends to know that he is not inferior to them, but was fully aware of the fact that God is in control of this world. And so, speaking the truth, he would not remain silent and allow his friends to continue throwing abuse after abuse upon them. Ephesians 4:15 commands every Christian to speak the truth in what? In love, right? In love. That chapter concludes with these words in verses 31 and 32. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another. It is easy when someone is not doing well, or there's a lot of pain, or maybe they had done a lot of bad things and now their life is in ruins because of the choices they made, for us to stand there with a superiority complex, say, I told you, and tell them how bad they were if they'd only listened to you. But aren't we in the same state? Maybe not in it physically, but aren't we in the same state in that we too are sinners? What was the parable that Jesus gave in that kind of comparison when we do things like that? Do you remember? Or can you think of one? You remember the one where the one man owed millions of dollars, like talents of gold to the king. There was no way he could ever pay it back. And the king was going to throw him in jail for it and sell everything he had. He said, have mercy on me and I will repay it. And he did have mercy. And what did the king do? He forgave him of the debt, and he didn't have to pay a penny. He said, I forgive you that debt, and he set him free. And then what did he go off and do?
He beat his slave and put him in prison because he owed him a little.
Yeah, he owed him like a day's wage, and he had him thrown in prison. And the king heard of it and threw him out into the place of darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. What did Job do wrong in the eyes of his friends? What was he doing wrong? That's right. He wasn't, in their eyes, he was not agreeing with their accusations. Now, why? Why didn't he? He knew the truth. Even though it seemed that at the moment all the world was against him, he would not give up the truth. Don't we see that same thing happening still today? And even more. In our country, we have a part of our laws, you are innocent until what? Until proven guilty. Are we abiding by that? I don't see it. Doesn't feel like it. If someone gets accused of something, they are taken into the social media, and companies will fire that guy or girl, and their whole life will be ruined, and then it'll come out that, no, that wasn't true, nothing actually happened, but it was too late. Their life was ruined because of an accusation. And we just judge people in the court of public opinion rather than give them an opportunity to present truth. That happens a lot. But every once in a while, somebody stands up for the truth. We'll see people I like Riley Gaines, the swimmer. I like her mainly because she went to Kentucky, so, I like Kentucky. But people who stand up for truth, what is the truth? Even when you got so much against them, when they stand up, we see that and we like that. It's almost like they're a beacon of truth, and they really are. And that's Job. He spoke up for the truth. Was it hard? Was it painful? Was he all alone? Well, yeah, he was. But God saw it. And God will bless him for it because he is standing up for what is right. And that's the attitude you and I need to have and need to remember, especially in this day and age. It can be easy to forget and to give in when so much is happening around. Remember what we always talk about, that a lot of times when there's a lot of stress in your life, we sometimes put on those blinders and all we can see is the problem and not the fact that God's in control. And that is what Job is doing. He is reminding not only the friends, but himself, God's in control. So he doesn't put the blinders on. He doesn't forget. And we need to always keep that in our forefront of our mind too. That's why it's so important to read and study and think of our Bibles every day to prepare for the day. So we keep that at the forefront of our mind. Because one day we'll find ourselves in a situation like many people are right now, and we may be forced to or be asked to compromise truth. And it's so easy to simply say a few words and all of it goes away. But we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't do it. We're in a world right now where truth is attacked on a daily basis, and we need to be standing up for that truth. Any comments or questions? Not much talk back today. Didn't have Quentin here. What's going on? All right. Well, all right then. We're going to pick up that there's 2 more chapters of Job's response on this, and so please read ahead. We're going to take a look at those, and then we're going to do the next 2 chapters next Wednesday, Lord willing, and we'll hopefully have a bit more of a conversation from that one. So read ahead. Let's think about that.